Hey, everybody. I hope and pray that you're doing well today. So we come to our word from the word. And today that word is pursuit. Pursuit. Now, if you notice, if you recognize that picture of the Where's Waldo, right? It was always kind of this pursuit to find him. And I mean, you had to look and look and look and look. And then you'd think you'd see a lot of people that look like him, but you had to really study it. Sometimes just kind of get lucky, when you were looking at it to find it. But it doesn't work that way with Jesus. Now, luck is not involved. Now, it's something interesting though that in that kind of that same mindset, we have to be studying to make sure we're looking in the right places. We need to make sure that we're pursuing him. But there's something funny that happens once we pursue Jesus, and if you want to just use that same theme, like once we catch up with Jesus, there's something that we'll find out. Zacchaeus found this out in Luke 19. One of those familiar stories, and one of those stories many of us grew up hearing in church when we were kids, and hearing and singing the little songs and thinking about him climbing up the sycamore tree and all that. But I want us to notice something, just one part of that today. Now I'm going to read Luke 19 verses 1 through 10. Then we'll really just kind of focus on one thought through this today. Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up in a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, he is gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor, and if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore fourfold. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Now, here's the point. There's a lot of things that we could talk about in this story, like many of them that we look at. But the one thing that kind of jumped out to me this time as I was looking over this story, I think about Zacchaeus and his pursuit of Christ. Right? It says he was going to see who Jesus was, and we can only imagine that he had heard and he knew, and he had been around and he knew the crowds, and he had this idea, almost in my sanctified imagination, right? That he had this idea of, well, if I can just figure out who he is, maybe he can help. And he realized that tax collectors were considered, among the scum of the earth for the Jewish community. And that's why so many times you see them talking about harlots and sinners and tax collectors, right? It's something they say, sinners and tax collectors, like they're a whole different brand of sinner. They felt betrayed by these tax collectors, and many of them were dishonest. And not only was he a tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. So regardless, even if he was an honest tax collector, he has this desire to know Jesus. Now, he can't get to him because he's short. And sometimes there seem to be physical limitations that keep us from getting to as near to Christ as we think we ought to be. And sometimes there's some legwork that we have to put in physically as well. I mean, you got to make the effort to go to your Bible. You got to make the effort to have a time of prayer. You got to have an effort to come to church. You got to have an effort to come to Bible study. You got to have an effort to get together with God's people, right? We have to make an effort to do those things. But as far as salvation goes, right, it's like we're striving after Jesus, and we think, okay, well, I can just get there, and if I can just do this or just do that. And the people weren't letting him get to Jesus. Think about if you're listening and you are born again, think about when you were lost and you were trying to seek after Jesus, even in your sinful state, right? You think, okay, well, I was trying to get to him, but it didn't seem like I could. And if you're watching and listening and you're not born again, it may feel like today, like you like, well, I'm trying to seek after Jesus, but I just don't seem like I can get to him. Well, Zacchaeus goes ahead and he goes ahead of the crowd and he climbs up in the tree just so he can see Jesus. And then Jesus stops at that tree and says, Zacchaeus, come down, for I must stay at your house. Now, here's the part that I guess just kind of stood out a little bit differently for me today. See, as Zacchaeus was pursuing Christ, once he finally got to Christ, he realized Christ was pursuing him. Christ had already made dinner reservations at the house of Zacchaeus. He had already made plans to come into the house, to have fellowship with Zacchaeus, knowing that Zacchaeus would accept him with joy, and also knowing that Zacchaeus had a desire to spend time with him. Ultimately, we see his dedication to the Lord and the fact that salvation had come to that house because he was willing to repay, to prove that he was changed, that he was not a sinful man in that sense. We know he's still a sinner, just like all of us. But the change that happened in that house is actually the change that happened in his heart. And when we finally come to Christ, we realize we kind of have that moment of like, hey, I found him. I got a hold of Christ. And then we realize I didn't find him. He found me. And if you're lost today and you feel like you're seeking after him, just stop where you're at. Cry out to him. He's already seeking after you. God sent Jesus into the world to die in our place. For while we were sinners, he demonstrated his love to us while we were still sinners by sending Christ to die for us, to die for you, to die for me. See, in all the pursuit, in all of our chasing him down, all along we'll find out that verse 10 is oh so true. He came to seek and to save that which was lost. Thank God that he is pursuing us. God bless you. And I pray you have a great, great day.